WWE fans love a good long storyline to get their teeth stuck into, tuning in week after week and month after month to see how it develops. Sometimes, however, there is an episode of WWE television or a pay-per-view that revolves around one particular storyline thread or show-long angle that is as good as anything that utilizes a longer build. These are often part of the bigger picture, yes, but the way that they unfold over the course of a single event helps them stand out as their own thing. What I'm saying is, don't argue with me, alright? I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 best One Night WWE Storylines. Join us! Number 10, No Mercy for Triple H. WWE were in a bind heading into No Mercy 2007 as WWE Champion John Cena got injured on Raw 6 days prior. With Big Match John on the shelf for the foreseeable future, a new champion needed to be crowned, and where better to do that than on pay-per-view? Vince McMahon handed the title to Cena's planned opponent Randy Orton to kick the show off, only for Triple H to goad Vince to put the Viper into a title match against him, which Orton then lost. However, the game was originally scheduled to take on Umaga, so McMahon kept that match on the card and made it a title affair to boot. Triple H managed to see off the Samoan Bulldozer, but Vince informed him while he was getting his ribs taped up in the trainer's room that fans were also promised a last man standing match on the show, and that the King of Kings would have to defend the belt once more against Orton, who was invoking his automatic rematch clause in the stipulation bout. Randy won that one, bringing to a close a novel show that had seen 3 title matches and the belt go from Orton to Triple H and back to Orton again. Number 9, Beat the Clock. Ahead of the 2005 New Year's Revolution pay-per-view, Raw General Manager Eric Bischoff had a surprise for those scheduled to clash in the Elimination Chamber match over the vacant World Heavyweight title. On the December 27th, 2004 edition of Raw, Eazy-E announced a show-long Beat the Clock challenge. This would see all 6 combatants compete against surprise opponents. The caveats were that whoever won their match the fastest would become the last entrant into the chamber, while anyone who lost their match would be out of the chamber bout and replaced by the person who beat them. The stakes were certainly high then, and it made for some good drama, with Randy Orton setting the pace before Chris Benoit got the next best time, which was then obliterated by Batista. The animal doing this caused some dissension with Triple H, with the game unable to beat Shelton Benjamin in time while coming perilously close to losing his spot. To cap things off, Bischoff brought out the returning Shawn Michaels at the end of the show, announcing him as the special guest referee for the chamber match. Hell of a deal here, and WWE were wise to reuse the Beat the Clock concept in later years. Number 8, Vince McMahon Appreciation Night. The June 11th, 2007 edition of Raw was a 3-hour affair back when that was a novelty that featured not only that year's draft and participation from Raw, SmackDown and ECW wrestlers, but also the Vince McMahon Appreciation Night. Something tells me that's the last time WWE's going to run one of those. The recurring theme of the night was that Vince was a very, very bad person with few, if any, redeeming qualities. I mean, did we really need to sit through a 3-hour show to find out something we already knew? After McMahon read a statement claiming he had all of his mental faculties at the beginning of the show, people from Vince's present and past made intermittent appearances to mostly dunk on his character. This led to McMahon himself coming out at the end of the night, though he looked confused, said nothing, and walked backstage before heading to the car park and getting into his limo, which promptly blew up. This was supposed to lead to a summer-long Who Killed Vince storyline, but, well, things happened, and... Number 7, Raw is ECW. With most of the WWE roster touring Germany at the time, Monday Night Raw got extreme as the ragbag crew from Paul Heyman's Philadelphia-based promotion accepted Jerry the King Lawler's challenge and showed up on the February 24th, 1997 episode of the show. This was not just a great boon for the fledgling extremists who were counting down the days until their first ever pay-per-view, but it also made WWE's flagship show feel different and interesting for the first time in a while. As well as matches between ECW stars, you had moments like the Eliminators wiping out a ring boy, Sabu diving off the Big R in the entranceway, and the night-long war of words between Heyman and Jerry Lawler on comms. ECW stars had shown up on WWE television television before and would do so again for a short time after, but this was the one night where they really made their presence felt in the absence of WWE's biggest stars. Yeah, you still had to put up with stuff like the Godwins versus the New Blackjacks and an arm wrestling match between Sonny and Marlena, but the ECW bits were exciting and added an air of unpredictability. Number 6, the captivating saga of Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, and the Hart Foundation. The April 21st, 1997 episode of Raw was all about the interaction between Steve Austin and Bret Hart, with Shawn Michaels and the rest of the Hart Foundation thrown in for good measure. It started with Stone Cold challenging the Hitman to a street fight, which Bret accepted, though Austin seemingly couldn't wait and was soon shown trying to break down the Hart Foundation's dressing room door. The street fight turned out to be a ruse, giving the Foundation the opportunity to lay in a beating, though Michaels soon popped up from the crowd to take out the tag champs. That gave Austin the chance to destroy Bret's knee, which prompted Gorilla Monsoon to throw the Texan out of the building. By the way, all of this happened within the first hour of the show. Anyway, the Texas Rattlesnake returned in hour 2, emerging from the ambulance Bret was loaded into and laying a further beating on the excellence of execution before being chased off by the Rocket and the Bulldog. But even that wasn't the end of it, as Austin came back again for a closing interview with McMahon that devolved once again into a brawl involving Owens, Smith, and Michaels, and a returning Brian Pillman, who revealed himself as the newest member of the Hart Foundation. Oh, it used to be better, didn't it? Number 5, the trial of Eric Bischoff. As great as Eric Bischoff was in his role as Raw General Manager, as 2005 came to a close, there was a strong sense that his heel authority figure shtick had become played out, and that there really wasn't much more he could do after 3.5 years on the job. And thus, WWE wrote him out of storylines on the December 5th, 2005 episode of Raw with the trial of Eric Bischoff. The former WCW head honcho had to plead his case in a courtroom to Judge Vince McMahon in a bid to save his skin, with Jonathan Coachman acting as defense attorney and Mick Foley heading up the prosecution. Chris Masters played the bare-chested, peck-popping bailiff, naturally. Multiple witnesses were called, including Masters, Stephanie McMahon, Tajiri, Daivari, the Boogeyman, and Maria. The show kept cutting back and forth to the testimony between matches, and everyone played their parts brilliantly, creating some genuinely funny moments inside the courtroom. Eazy-E's fate was ultimately determined in the ring at the end of the show, where he was fired by McMahon, FU'd by John Cena, and taken out of the arena in a trash truck. Number 4, Deadly Game. Vince Russo deservedly gets a lot of stick for 99% of his contributions to professional wrestling. But we have to give him credit for the other 1%, which includes what many consider his masterpiece, the Deadly Game tournament to crown a new world champion at Survivor Series 98. It's far from perfect and the wrestling is mostly crap, but the wrestling was really besides the point on a night where you had multiple story threads converge and new storylines begin thanks to this singular, well-booked tournament. You had Mankind as the supposedly hand-picked patsy with an easy route to the final, the ongoing war between Kane and The Undertaker, the attempts to suppress Stone Cold and prevent him from getting the gold, and finally, the big reveal that The Rock was the chosen corporate champion all along, complete with a Montreal Screwjob recreation for the finish. If you're in it for the graps and don't fancy seeing DQs or about 15 Big Boss Man appearances, this is not the show for you, but as a one-night storyline with a fantastic payoff, it really is hard to find too much fault with it, bro. Number 3, Mankind wins the big one. He may have been screwed out of winning his first WWE title at Survivor Series 1998, but Mankind would get his day sooner rather than later. The January 4th, 1999 episode of Raw, which was actually filmed on December 29th, was famously the scene of Mick Foley's title triumph. But while everyone may remember the result and that pop, it's often forgotten that Mankind's big win was the build-up to other goings-on throughout the night. You had the reunion of DX, some back and forth between Mankind and Mr. McMahon, Shane screwing Mankind over in his match with Triple H, where the winner would receive a spot in the upcoming Rumble, Mankind then threatening Shane McMahon with bodily harm and getting his match with The Rock, Commissioner Shawn Michaels getting attacked backstage, and finally, the thoroughly sports-entertaining main event which saw DX scrap with the corporation and Steve Austin return to turn the tide while receiving a glass-shattering ovation. You can argue that these events were all continuations of other storylines, Austin vs. McMahon, Rock vs. Mankind, and so on, but everything came together wonderfully in this one episode to create a great night-long arc. Number 2, the old Stone Cold. Alright, so this one was technically a 2-show deal, as Vince McMahon had already tried to convince Steve Austin, who had lost a lot of his edge and was constantly hugging his boss, to become the old Stone Cold once again. That was on SmackDown, but what we're looking at here is the Raw after, where a despondent Texas rattlesnake drowned his sorrows at referee Tim White's Friendly Tap Tavern while mulling over whether he had it in him to lead the WWF against the invading WCW and ECW alliance. The show kept cutting back to Austin as White and McMahon tried to get through to him, but it was only after witnessing a locker room rah-rah speech capped off with Freddie Blassie standing up from his wheelchair that the world champion decided enough was enough and headed to the arena. During the show closing brawl, Austin showed up in his pickup truck and proceeded to stomp about 17 different mudholes in various alliance members, almost single-handedly evening the odds for his outnumbered comrades. Granted, this might not have been a great way to build up the opposition ahead of the Invasion pay-per-view, but it was one hell of a conclusion to what had been an engrossing show-long storyline. Number 1, a flair for the gold. On the May 19th, 2003 episode of Raw, which took place the night after the Judgment Day pay-per-view, co-Raw general manager Steve Austin demanded that Triple H defend his World Heavyweight title, allowing the game to choose his opponent so long as the person was a former world champ. Rather than Kane, Shawn Michaels, Chris Jericho, Booker T, or Kevin Nash, Hunter chose his running buddy Ric Flair, much to the annoyance of Stone Cold. See, it was assumed that the Evolution members would put on a sham match, while the Cerebral Assassin openly asked the Nature Boy to take a dive, in Flair country no less. The rest of the show featured segments involving Triple H, Flair, and Michaels, as Slick Rick, after a pep talk from HBK, ultimately decided that he was going to challenge for the title for real in the main event. The match itself was an emotional affair, and they really had fans believing that Flair could pull it off and win his 17th world title before falling victim to the pedigree. Because of course Triple H went over clean on the hometown hero.